So, Photoshop, right? It's one of the most powerful tools for online content, but what does it actually do? You hear people talk about how things look photoshopped all the time, but what do they mean? Is it always a bad thing? Well, first and foremost, what is Photoshop? The Adobe Photoshop program is a graphics editor, which means it can do a lot of things, but mostly related to still images. Mostly. Some people use it to draw. I don't because I can't draw. Some people use it to clean up photos. Some people use it to create fantastical images, and some people use it to create logos. What Photoshop provides is possibility with very simple tools. Anyone can use the program because it's just tweaking different values until things look right. It's numbers and patience. But this is just a video going over the basics of Photoshop and how to use it most effectively. So let's get started. When you launch the program, you're going to want to hit File and then New. This brings up a window with options to set up your project. You can name it, change the orientation, resolution, and background color. Most importantly, it lets you set the dimensions for the document, and also the units. Your units can be in inches, or pixels, or centimeters, or picas, or whatever. Just know which ones you selected. I usually go with pixels myself because I usually know what size screen I'll be using later on. A high definition image is typically 1920 by 1080, so that's what I'll enter today. Once you're finished with this window, you can hit Create. Once you're in the program, you're literally presented with a blank slate, which is slightly intimidating when you don't know how to get around yet, so here's a brief tour. This is your toolbox. This is your layer panel where more things will start to build up once we get going. These are your tabs. You can have more than one document open at a time, so you can work on multiple things pretty easily. So even I don't know what all these little buttons do, but the most important tool to know is the Move tool. This is pretty much what you'll have selected most of the time, and if you're ever too lazy to go all the way back up here, you can just hit V, since it's the automatic shortcut for the tool. Very useful, and it makes you feel like a hacker. The zoom tool is great, but make sure you have scrubby zoom selected up top since that's the easiest and most intuitive way to use the tool. Just click and drag right to go in and left to come out. The text tool creates new text layers. Select the tool, click on your workspace, and start typing. Hit enter once you're done. Whenever you're done with anything in Photoshop, hit enter to finalize the changes. To resize your text, go back to the Move tool and make sure that the box next to Show Transform Controls has a check mark. Then just click and drag the corners of the text box to transform it. These are the same controls for every layer and object in Photoshop. Once again, hit enter to finalize your changes. If you want to undo something, you can head up to Edit and then step backwards or hit Command Z. But to go back multiple steps, you have to hold Command, Option, and then Z. I don't really know why. You'll notice that your text is on its own layer in the layer panel. Any effects or changes you make will only affect what's on the layer you have selected. The most useful thing about Photoshop is the ability to create and manipulate layers. To create new blank ones, you just click the little button down here. To duplicate an existing layer, select one and then hit Command J. Layers can be shuffled around or reordered by clicking and dragging. For even more choices, right or control click on the layer for an additional panel for options like merging or renaming layers. You should also be able to rename them by just clicking on their name. Grouping layers into folders can be done two ways. You can either create a group first by clicking this button here and then dragging all the right layers into the group, or you can select the layers first and then click the button and it will sort them automatically. This button here opens up an effects panel. Effects can be applied to either groups or individual layers themselves, but you can play around with those yourself. Stuff like drop shadows, glows, and strokes are all in here. Layer styles can be changed up here. You can make things an overlay or a color burn or a soft light or any of these choices, and you can change the opacity even further with this slider on the right. So the last thing I want to touch on is why layers become so important, and that is the ability to mask out objects. Let's say that for some reason I wanted to Photoshop this guy in front of a volcano. I could go about this a few different ways. First of all, if you already have a photo with a transparent background, you just have to embed it in the document. So go up to File and then Place Embedded. Select the right file, drop it in, and then resize to fit the screen. Or just click and drag onto the workspace. If you drag a photo directly onto the Photoshop app, it will actually create a new document with that photo as its first layer. But if you don't already have a transparent background, there's a couple ways to get one. So go back up and select your file to embed and resize so that the edges of the photo are visible on your document. Now select that layer and hit this button here to create a layer mask. A white box should appear next to your images. Make sure you have it selected. Then you have three choices. The hard way, the easy way, and the way that you should probably do it, but it takes a painstaking amount of time. But it's good for you. Anyway, if you want to do it by hand, select the brush tool and start painting over the unwanted areas. If nothing happens, hit X and try again. That will switch the brush from background to foreground colors, black versus white, or vice versa. To make the brush bigger, you can hit the right bracket button and the left to make it smaller. Or you can right-click on the workspace to bring up this panel with a few sliders. One is brush size and the other is the feather. Slide left for a soft brush and right for a hard line. You can also change the brush shape, but you don't really need that right now. Then hit enter and brush over the photo to remove the image. Hit X to switch the colors again and go back, touching up mistakes. Or don't do this method in the first place because it's really hard and imprecise. The really easy and imprecise way is to use the magnetic lasso tool. So let's delete our layer mask for a second. Head over to the toolbox and find where it says lasso tool, right click, and then find the magnetic lasso tool. This tool tries to follow the edges of your image, so start on the end and then just move your mouse along the edge. At the end, connect the loop by clicking on the first box again. Then right click on the image and hit make selection. This creates an army of ants marching around your selection. Then hit the layer mask button. But you'll notice that this method is a little bit crude and the edges are a little choppy, so the best way to mask out an object is actually use the pen tool, which is the painfully slow one. Start out by selecting the pen tool from your toolbox, then zoom in and place your first point somewhere on the edge of the person. Then move to a spot where the natural curve changes and place another point, drag when it looks a little closer. Then hold down the Option key and move these little arms until the line matches up with the edge of your person. The arm should point in a straight line towards the curve's changing slope. Then repeat this process over and over again until you form a complete loop by connecting the last point back to the first. Then right click and hit make selection and then hit the mask button again. Then sit back and marvel at a job well done. Now there's a crisp, clear image of a man standing in front of a volcano. Resize, hit enter, select the brush tool and touch up a few of your rough spots, and you're done. Yep, that's the power of Photoshop. And this is just the basics. Endless possibilities await. Good luck.